All right, welcome to the Action Martial Arts Power Hour. This is a show we talk about anything and everything and who knows what, martial arts related, not martial arts related. This is Alan Goldberg's brainchild, and I'm going to bring him on because he's going to explain it a lot better than I can. Alan, the
Hey
floor is yours.
guys, how you doing, guys? Great to have you, and great we have a very special guest, Jeff Smith, on, and we're excited. Jeff has so many great stories, and he's one of the guys that are on the forefront of martial art world. Funny thing, I just spoke to a buddy of mine today, which Jeff, you had to know, Louis Neglia, and he's rearranging a lot of things in his life now. And I laugh to say, none of us are youngsters anymore. You know, we got to go to the next level. You know, so matter of fact, we're having lunch next week, and good guy. I probably know him 45 years. Oh, I'm glad he's starting to slow down a little bit, not much, but he's slowing down a little bit. But you know, a lot of things have been going on. The controversy with Frank Dukes and Don Wilson is still out there. There's a gentleman. Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you're coming in. Now we're all together now.
There was a gentleman, his name's Dewey, and he has his own YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And his average channel, you know, videos are 3,000, 4,000 video. And, you know, he has a really nice show. It's good numbers. Mm-hmm. But he did the thing stupidly, Don Wilson. And as of today, it was 130,000 people watched the video. So I think Frank shot himself in the foot. Now, we just put out, and I spoke to today, I'm waiting again to hear back from Sky Benson, the student. And, you know, we offered him to come on the show. We haven't been nasty about it, except Frank gets nasty and stupid, things like that, because he's defending himself, or he at least thinks he's defending himself. Yeah. But most people know what's going on with him.
Yeah, it's good press, and he's probably from the school of thought that any press is good press. You know, they're talking about you. At least they're talking about you. You know, there's a lot of movie stars that are like that. They don't care.
But he's not a movie star, right?
Oh, I know. I just said there's a lot of movie stars that do that. Yeah, so, you know, Frank is trying to play that role, and so he's playing it to the hilt. But you know, he's fucking with the wrong guy with Don Wilson. I mean,
yeah.
But you got somebody that's been around too long and has done too much and has too big a fan base. And when you talk things about him, you got to realize that everything you said can be backed up by somebody else who saw it.
It's legitimate.
Frank said nobody can back up.
So legitimate.
2,500 comments on the video alone.
Really?
And none of them were for Frank. None of them were for Frank. They were all in Don Wilson's favor.
But he kind of shifted over to the Karate Kid now, right?
Yeah, now he shifted. But look, could you run that video of Frank Dukes fighting again?
Yeah, I've been looking for it. I don't know. I went in the backyard. I looked in the hall. I couldn't find anything.
Still couldn't find it, huh?
I found some blurry thing, but it was cast with a ghost, so I don't know.
I actually watched one of the Benny Hill things last night.
Yeah,
I think that was better. Ready, but you know, we put out.
The good thing we've all been around long enough, you know, to see martial arts really evolve. You know, back in the early '60s to present day, it's gone through a lot of changes, and I just really am grateful that I was able to start when I did.
Yeah.
Because it was right at the beginning, and I did miss that little very first part with you know, the original part with Chuck and Joe. You know, because I was a white belt and not understanding what was going on as much as I did, and saw them fight and watched it. But you know, when you go forward and look back, you don't realize how great of time that was, and how unique a position we were in to be that part of history.
You turned out to be the name that people know also, the great Jeff Smith. So you've done your homework and you came up and did what you had to do. So you know,
and you know what I want to do, Alan? I want to play some of that footage because it is legitimate. So hang out with me. I'm going to play some of that.
So again, back to that. We have the Frank Dukes, and we offered him a percentage of the pay-per-view, and so far I haven't heard back from him yet. He attacked me and Dana Stamos and Sheldon Lennox last 2 days ago.
Really?
And I just, yeah, he put a beautiful.
Can attack Dana Stamos. She's she's a kind heart.
Well, he said that we're
attacking Mother Teresa.
Right. But here's what he said:
so nice.
that me and Dana are very well liked, but we're not really sincere people because we don't believe your shit. That's the problem. So but I put on the Black Dragon site, I put a whole bunch of videos up, which is proof in itself because they were recorded by other people, court case, two actually lawyers and a judge that did videos on Frank just saying he was a little punch drunk. And these come from TV. These are not, bullshit things made up. So there's some. If you get a chance to look at my thing, but we're leaving it open. We're not going to kill Frank. We don't want to. We want him on the show to ask him questions. Now he did say one thing that Don and I went back on him with. That he said he put tapes on, and he had them on YouTube, and his detractors had it taken off. I said to him, I offered to him, go to rumble.com. And put your videos on there because they don't take your videos off Rumble.
Right.
Even because they were public. You're saying they were put out publicly. So there's no big deal. Or send them to us and we'll put them out. If you have fights that you send me into a day, and we just want to see them. Frank, if you're listening, which I know you are, you're probably sitting waiting for this to come out. We really want to know the truth. Are you who or what you want? And then you had a little controversy about what Sheldon was telling us about the picture. And Jeff may know a little about this. He has a picture with him with a .357 Magnum, 22 rifle, which looks like an AR-15. It's not, and a Radio Shack, a walkie-talkie, and that was supposed to be a military picture.
Military grade. Okay.
Is this when he was in junior high school?
No, Sheldon told me it was from his movie, and Frank put it in his book saying it was him in the jungle. Number one, they didn't allow you. They didn't allow you in the jungle.
Budgets were lower then. Budgets were small.
Yeah, but they didn't allow you in on a conflict with a nickel-plated weapon because it would bring attention. You'd be killed. Okay, and they weren't giving you a 22 rifle. You were in the jungle.
Yeah.
And Radio Shack was not the state-of-the-art radios that were being used during the Vietnam War. So anyway, we've seen that one. But let's go on. Again, I'm very excited.
And before we go into that, I want to do one more thing, Alan, because I know with the Frank Dukes and all this stuff, I mean, there's some whatever. I guess the videos out there. I've seen some stuff, and it's just I don't know. I mean, if you're real at what you do, you can show what you can do. What I want to do, I want to show people what you can do, Alan.
Let me bring on our special guest. I'm very excited. Jeff has Lou and I were talking about this. Jeff has a repertoire of his career, and you can just talk on and on about things you have done in your life. And I'm going to ask you some questions that we've gone over before, and hopefully we both remember where we're going with this. Because, we don't know what the hell we're doing on the show. But Jeff, your career has really gone off. And give us a little insight about the amazing team that was built with Joe Louis and you guys, Bill Wallace, yourself, and how that happened. Now, I know that was after Chuck Norris, right? If I'm not mistaken. Okay.
And are we going back before the first World Championships when we were going to Europe and competing against all the European teams?
That's you, buddy. We want to know about you, so you can talk about anything you want.
Okay, I got it. So, luckily I was able to come up the time that I did, with Bill Wallace and Joe Louis, and Chuck was just retired. Chuck really retired in '69 from most tournaments, but then he did a couple special ones after that, but mainly from the circuit. He pretty much retired in '69, but I got to watch him, fight Skipper and Fred Wren, and all the guys, Ed Daniels and Jim Harrison, and all the great fighters back then. But you know, in 1970, Mike Anderson, you know, he was one of June Ree's black belts, and he was in Germany in the military, and he teamed up with George Bruckner, who had a school in Berlin, and they decided they wanted to bring American karate over and let them see what we're really doing with the tournaments, because those guys that over in Europe back then didn't have a clue on what we were doing. We were kind of, you know, leaps and bounds ahead of them. And so the first time we went over there, you know, he brought on that team was me, Joe Louis, Bill Wallace, Jim Buten, and Howard Jackson, and Al DeCascos, Malaya DeCascos, Bruce Lee's wife, Linda Lee. You know, and this was right after his passing. And we did a tour all over Europe, but we started in Berlin, and we had the U.S. versus the U.S. versus Europe, and they put together teams from other countries, but it was one team from Europe, right? And we pretty much hardly had a point even scored on us the whole time. We were winning the matches. They were quite a spread there, you know, but. After competing there, we went to Mike took us on a bus, and we went to Amsterdam, and then we were going to compete against the Dutch team, and we fought the Dutch team, and then we went to Rotterdam and some of these other outlying suburbs or cities and fought a different team every day, and the best one, and probably the one that we still talk about, and Jim Harrison talked about it forever because, you know, he was with us, and Heidi Ochai was with us. And so we were in Amsterdam, and we were fighting against the national Dutch team. Well, that's what they told us, right? And then we get up there, and we look across the mat when we're bowing in, and there's a green belt, a blue belt, a red belt. They were all lower belts. There was only one black belt, so there was only one guy from the team. So we asked, you know, what's going on? Where's the rest of the guys? Well, the coach of the team was on the national team, but he wasn't fighting, right? He said, oh, our national team would destroy you. You guys, you know, cannot hold the candle to our guys. So you can fight our students. That'll be hard enough for you. Well, we beat these guys. I fought the only black belt, and I beat him 22-0. Jim Harrison was the center referee. So Jan Maker, who was a judo Olympian, he was a gold medalist in judo, and he was the promoter of the event. And the Kosha Shinkai team, that was the national team, but it wasn't from his school. So I went over to him. He's on the microphone. We're in an auditorium, and so they're sitting out in like you're in a theater, right? We're up on the stage. It's where all the fight. There's just our ring, right? One ring for the fighting. So after we all fought and beat them, I don't know what the total score was, like almost 100-1. Maybe they scored 1 point only, right? And so I go over and I ask Jan Maker. I said, hey, Jan, can I fight the coach of the Dutch team? He's on that national team. Can I fight him? And so he's right at the microphone at the podium, you know, just kind of like how your podium is setting. He's got that same one like it's your event. And he then on the microphone, he said, ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Smith of the U.S. team has challenged whatever his name was, to a full contact match. Well, we were fighting with equipment, right? And these guys didn't even have equipment. But we put the equipment on because we knew if we hit them without the equipment, we're going to knock them out, get disqualified or whatever, because it was a point tournament, right? But it's Kosha Shinkai, so it's pretty hard contact. Well, now he says full contact. Well, we go out there, and Jim Harrison's the center referee now, right? And so I think we're going to fight in reality, kind of like we did already, which was hard contact, but not trying to kill each other, right? So I go out there. He comes in. I front kick him, knock him back, but he grabs my foot, sweeps my other leg, and then stomps by my head. And I moved out of the way, right? So I get up and I said, okay, we're playing Texas rules. So then I blitz him, I side kick him, and I knock him over where the officials were sitting. They had one straight long table, kind of like one of your tables you have at your event that all your people are sitting at. And he does a backflip over it. They get him back over. Give him 5 minutes to resuscitate himself, comes back in. He comes in again. This time I kick him, knocks him back. He comes again. And I punch him and knock him down. Now, we're doing this kind of fighting. It's not the normal point break and all that. Jim Harrison is, you don't do the 1 point and stop. They let you go boom, 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 right? So I knock him down, and then I go over and stomp him right on his head. His head's coming up. I stomp him. It goes down, and I mean, he is out. Blood all over the stage, out of his nose, right? Jim Harrison is over him counting. It's supposed to be a point match. Well, he doesn't even come to. His students come up there, they get him, and we're thinking, okay, where's the doctor? Who's going to take care of this guy? I was afraid he was going to die, right? They come over. One student picks up his legs, and now they're going to take him to the back locker rooms, right? And he starts walking. Well, the guy behind him didn't even pick up his arms, so now he's dragging him, and there's a trail of blood going, and he goes down the steps on the back of the stage, and it's donk, donk, donk. And the guy was so pissed off. When Jan Maker first called him up there, he came over and he was in street clothes, right? He said, oh, I don't have my uniform. And so one of his students runs over, Sensei, you can have my uniform. Take my uniform. Now he was in the spot, so he didn't even want to fight anyway. But now this gets even better. Now the head of the Kosha Shinkai group comes over. Jan Maker's on the microphone announcing the next thing, and they're doing demos and everything, like a regular show. And all of a sudden, the guy comes right across the stage. And you know how they put the podium over to the side so you can see everything on the stage? Mm-hmm. He comes up the far stairs, comes right across the stage where everybody can see him. And as he walks towards Maker looks at him. And just as he looks, the guy is lunging and throwing a right hand, hits him right on the jaw. And I went, oh, my God, he's going to knock him out, right? Now, Jan Maker, judo guys aren't the little skinny guys. Mm-hmm. Right. This guy is built like a truck, right? He's got a neck, about a 22-inch neck. So he hits him, and his face goes just like this. I couldn't believe it. He hit him. His head goes like that, and then he comes back and whips back. He grabs him, picks him up, and body slams him. Now, every student from his school and every student from the Kosha Shinkai thought that was an invitation. It looked like one of those soccer games in Europe when when the stands all start fighting. People were coming out of the stands, the stage. There were people everywhere. Were punching.
The Wanderers, Jeff, like the Wanderers.
It was Joe and Bill and I were standing there like this, just by the side, and people were coming by us. We weren't doing anything, right? Cops come. They clear everybody out. They give us a police escort out. So Joe and I said, okay, the cops said that some of the guys on that other group were tied in with the mafia over there, and there might be guns outside. They might be waiting for you guys. So I said, well, we don't like a surprise. I said, Joe, come with me. So we went up by where the exit was, and we just stood there kind of waving bye to everybody. Everybody, as they went by, they were like, oh, we love you guys. Great fight. And so everybody, and so I went back and I told the guys, I said, they're not upset with us. They're upset with Jan Baker. So
Yeah.
we got in the car and went to the hotel.
A question.
Funny.
Mike Anderson, is he still alive and okay, or do you know?
He's down in Florida.
All right, because we were good friends, and then he disappeared. We
What a great guy. And I tell you, our martial arts owe so much history to him.
Oh,
you know,
yeah,
the
100%.
things that he was doing. You know, he put the whole Waco thing together with Bruckner. He took us all over Europe. You know, we went to Paris, we went to Amsterdam, we went to Austria, Switzerland, Spain, UK, Ireland.
He was amazing.
He fought in all those countries. And, you know, we would put the team together. And then I had, you know, we even did it. I was coach of that Waco team, bringing U.S. teams over there from 80 to 90. Those 10 years, we won 10 consecutive world championships. And we were doing point fighting and full contact. And the first team I took over, because we couldn't take all the point guys and all the full contact guys, we only took 7 guys. And they all did point. And then when they would finish that match, they would run over to the other ring, do a full contact match, finish that, come back and do a point match. They were, and that was Troy Dorsey and Steve Anderson and Ray McCallum and John Longstreet. And, you know, those guys back then, you know, really good fighters, Tommy Williams. So they were winning. They won gold medals in both the point and the full contact. So they had to fight double matches and going on at the same time, whereas the other countries had a full point team. They had a full contact team. And we still won the team title, even though we had half as many people on the team as the other ones did. So the next time, Mike let us bring a full team. So, and we even brought women the next time. So I brought Linda Denley and Helen Chung and a bunch of the other females that were good at the time. And then, of course, they all won gold medals. And so great times. And every year it was in a different country. So we got to go to England, we get to go to Ireland, we go to Venice. It was quite the experience. And most of these guys that I would take now, you know, we arranged to pay all of their expenses, paid them $500 a piece, because that was back when nobody was getting any money for anything, right? And I talked to Mike and I said, Mike, these guys got to have some spending money. So, and then I went and bought jackets for them. So we had U.S. team jackets. I bought bags. I got Century to donate the uniforms. So we looked like a real team. If you see some of those pictures with those satin jackets with USA across it, the white ones with the red, white, and blue, I bought all that stuff. I had baseball caps for them. So we looked like a real team, because these teams over there, they were serious. You know, they had Adidas and all these other companies.
Government funded a lot of them.
Everything. Yeah, they funded everything for them. So they looked first class. So I didn't want to go over there with a bunch of, vagabonds and look like a bunch of,
bears and just all
exactly
stuff.
Everybody with a different color shirt or different uniform.
But Jeff, when you get a chance, if you can send me Mike's phone number, I have it somewhere, but I'd love to go.
I will. I'll do that.
It's been quite a few years since I spoke to him. Anyway, now I have to ask you. We'll go a little further.
Okay.
Probably one of the greatest days of your life, and that I look at, was a Thrilla in Manila when they asked you to fight in front of like 10 million people, whatever it was. And that had to be, I mean, there's nothing more that I would say.
It's one of the milestones for me, definitely. Yeah. You know, I have these little milestones that I kind of mark things, and that was one. You know, my first milestone was not just starting karate, but when Junri wanted me to come up to Washington, D.C. and teach for him. And now Junri came and gave me, I was in Texas, and that's where he started originally. So he gave me every one of my belt tests from white belt all the way to black belt. And he would fly to Texas each semester. I was doing it at the university, even when I was in junior high school, even though you had to be in college to be in the program. But my mother worked at the university, so they let some of the faculty staff, be in the program. Well, college guys didn't want us there. I was 14. They beat the hell out of us. These were big, adults. We're just little kids, 14 at the time. And so that's what toughened me up. You either get tough or die, right?
Yeah.
And, coming to Washington, D.C. after that in 1970 was a big milestone. Of course, winning, in the point fighting, being rated #1 by Black Belt Magazine over Bill Wallace and Howard Jackson for 2 years. And for those 2 years, 73 and 74, the three of us were back and forth for part of the year. Bill would be #1, I'd 2, Howard 3, and then vice versa. I would beat Bill, he would beat me, and Howard. The three of us were winning pretty much all the tournaments, or most of them, and enough to be the top 3 for those couple years. So we happened to be right at the right place at the right time, because when Mike Anderson decided to put that first full contact together. Now, the only reason we were able to do full contact like that back then and do what's called kickboxing now is because June Reed came up with all this safety gear. And the reason he came up with the safety gear is because of Mike Stone. Mike Stone is the one that actually put that gear together first.
Really?
But he didn't, he was trying to get it done. He had some prototypes, couldn't get the funding, decided he wasn't going to do anything with it. June Reed, so nice. Before he'll even go do it, he calls Mike Stone and asks him, is it okay if he does something? Really? Now, he didn't copy anything that Mike did, but he asked him, which he didn't have to, but you know how right. These real martial artists, it's all respect.
It's all about respect.
And Mike said, oh, sure, please do. I'm not going to do it. I'd love to have something like that done. So then Jun Rhee eventually started his own safety equipment company. And of course, I was running all his schools. I was the senior vice president. I was the chief instructor. And then when he started the safety equipment, he put me in charge of the safety equipment too. And I set up distributors for him in every country, South America, Canada, then in the UK, Paris, and I had international distributors. Yeah. So, we went from doing about 50,000 a month to doing almost $1 million a month back then. Mm. He got a big SBA loan and built a huge factory. We were making equipment for Century. We were making equipment for ProTech. We were making equipment for Kim in Baltimore. Wow. And then after Jun Rhee made that for a couple of years for him, they decided, now, even though Jun Rhee had all the patents, he had patents on everything. Well, Century decided they were going to make their own. ProTech decided they were going to have, find their own place to make it because, you cut out the middleman, right? There's one less person that is going to take a cut. And now Jun Rhee could have went and sued them all because there was no way that other equipment was so close to his, same material, same design. But Jun Rhee, being the martial artist he is, he said, as long as it's helping martial artists, and if they'll wear his instead of ours, that's fine as long as they're wearing it. I mean, it was amazing. And back then, Mike Anderson's the one that made the tournaments start using it. Yeah. The first tournament that I wore it at that actually used it was the Internationals, Ed Parker's tournament. Yeah. Jun Rhee says, you're going to Ed Parker's tournament and you're going to take all of this equipment. I had a dozen of these huge boxes. I had over 100 pairs of equipment, hands and 100 pairs of feet that I had to slap on a plane all the way. You would think he would just ship the damn stuff. No, you take it. We want to make sure it gets there.
The personal touch.
By hauling this stuff. We get to the tournament. Well, now they had seen it. Mike Anderson had it at top 10 nationals.
Top 10, right.
And Alan Steen had it at the U.S. championships already, but California hadn't had it yet, right? Yeah. So they bring it all out. And now Ed said, Ed Parker's one told him to, if you'll bring it, I'll let everybody wear it. Well, I get there. Well, now people started complaining they didn't want to wear it.
Really?
So I said, Master Parker, you're the promoter. It's your rules. You said it was mandatory. Just because they don't like it, they have a choice of competing or not. He said, I know, but these are my black belts and from, our area here. And I said, okay, well, let's be democratic about it. Let's vote. And whoever says the majority will rule. And he said, okay, you know, what could be more fair than that, right? So I'm right there by where he has the microphone. And then he says, okay, we're going to vote on whether you want it or not. Now, everybody was over here. He says, if you want to wear the equipment, come to this ring. If you don't want to wear it, go to this ring. So I'm on the microphone's right beside me. I say, okay, did everybody hear that? All the fighters over here, that's where the equipment was. All the pussies over here. So there wasn't 12 people that went over there without the equipment, right? But now Ed Parker says, because he sees that it was a bunch of people he knew that he had a little more in contact with that were probably influencing him. So he says, okay, well, it's optional. If you want to wear it, you can.
Okay.
So, of course, I wore it, and I ended up winning grand champion that night. And I beat John Natividad in the semifinals and Darnell Garcia in the final match. And we all had equipment, and Natividad wore equipment. I mean, so all the finalists were wearing the equipment. And, you know, the year before, that was when Darnell won that. The year before that, fighting Joe Louis, he beat Joe Louis. The year before that, Natividad won grand champion, and he beat Louis. So they were the two California favorites. But when I won it, it was the first time, only the second time, but the first time in 10 years that anybody won fighting grand champion outside of California. It was always, and even after that, it was nobody, Bill, nobody, Skipper, nobody, Fred, nobody ever outside of California ever won grand champion there but me and Alan Steen. And that's why I wanted to do it, because Alan Steen was Junri's first black belt, and then I was kind of the second generation of that.
Right.
So I was, really excited to be able to win it back then. But that was another milestone. And then the next one was the first World Championships. And the reason that was able to come about is because of Joe Louis and Mike Anderson. Either one without the other, it wouldn't have worked.
Really?
Because Joe had all of the Hollywood connections. He got Tannenbaum, one of the big movie producers.
Yeah, I know them.
He got all the stars invited to come there and do announcing and help and be in the audience and get it on national TV. It was on the Wide World of Entertainment back then on ABC. And so now they've got this big show, but the way they decided to do it, because it took a lot of organizing, and had it not been for the WACO, we could have never gotten a European team. Canada, we had a team. Mexico, we got David Moon, who put together a team. Japan, they had their connections from the Japanese, like Tadashi Uchida and a bunch of the other Mafuni and a bunch of the other guys that were Japanese stylists. And then they had the Korean team. So we had all these countries represented, and it made it a lot more legit rather than just having another, it's like when we have the Super Bowl and they call them world champions, or the World Series and it's the world champions. Well, it's just U.S. teams. It's not international teams that are coming, right? So sometimes it's hard to say it's a real world championship. And a lot of tournaments in the U.S. would say it was a world championship, but they didn't have international teams coming or anything, or representative. So they had, them, each country represented. Well, back then there was only 4 weight classes. So Mike Anderson had Professional Karate Magazine. In those ratings at that time, he took the number 1 lightweight, the number 1 middleweight, the number 1 light heavy, and the number 1 heavyweight, according to his rankings in the magazine. And those had been going on, and Black Belt Magazine had their ratings, which were pretty much right along the same, except Black Belt Magazine didn't have it according to weights back then. They had it just the top 10. So now he had 4 weight classes, not 5, but just 4. So Howard Jackson represented the super light and lightweight. and no, super light, and then lightweight was no, I'm sorry, super lightweight was added later. There was only lightweight, middleweight, light heavy, and heavy. So Howard was light, Bill was middle, I was light heavy, and Joe Louis was the heavyweight. And now Howard, Howard had been winning a lot of the tournaments, at 4 tournaments in a row. The Ocean City Grand, Pro-Am that Bob Maxwell put on. I had beaten Howard for grand champion there. Right after that, 2 weeks later, I fought him for grand champion at the Battle of Atlanta. He beat me there in an overtime. Both of them, we were going back and forth. The next year, same thing. I beat him in Ocean City. He beat me in Atlanta. And so we had, the best in the U.S. at the time to represent. Canada had Wally Slokey and Daniel Richet. And, I mean, they had some good point fighters back then. Daniel Richet and Slokey were, winning a lot of stuff. And you probably know Daniel Richet and that group from Lee Taekwondo up in Canada with the gray uniforms that would always come down to Henry Cho's and all the New York tournaments. And so it ended up, Howard really should have won the lightweight division, but 3 weeks, maybe a month before, there was a tournament in Denver, and he was fighting, and somebody had put a cup, a Coke cup, how they're the ones that have the kind of waxy. They had it on the floor, and he stepped back on it, and he tore his ACL. And he had a brace on his leg for 3 weeks and took it off just to fight in the tournament. So he was really pretty hobbled. And
we got friendly, me and Howard, probably the last 10 years that he was alive, we'll say. And he turned out to be a hell of a guy. What a nice person. Really good guy.
We would hang out all night together the night before and party, but neither one of us drank or smoked. And all the other guys like to drink and stuff, and they'd be getting drunk, and we'd be acting like we're drinking. We're just drinking Coke, right? And they would all be hungover, and we're all coming in fresh the next day.
Next day, yep.
But so he was the only one of us that lost the event. But the guy who beat him was actually one of June Reed black belts from Dominican Republic. His name was Ramon Smith. And then he fought David Moon's guy from Mexico, Isaias Duenas. And Isaias was actually a middleweight. He was normally 180 pounds, and he had to get down under 150 to fight in that division. And Ramon Smith was really a super lightweight. He was like 135 or 140 pounds, and real quick. I mean, he was like a thinner, even thinner than Howard Jackson, that kind of speed, but not the power of Howard. And so Isaiah beat him in the finals. So that's how it came out, Mexico and then 3 U.S. And then the next 3 or 4 months after that, Mike Anderson decided they were going to establish a super lightweight division because there was too many people that were a lot lighter than that, under 150, So he added that one, and he put the 2 highest rank at the time were from Mexico, Romero Guzman and Gordon Franks. And they fought. Bruckner did the world championship bout in Berlin. And then Gordon Franks won that match. And then he became the first super lightweight world champion. So then after that first 4 months, now there was 5 original world champions after that. And that's how that whole thing came about. And then the next milestone I would say would be when I got to fight in Hawaii. And Hawaii was really fun for me because it was the first time that they had a no rules tournament. And this wasn't the Frank Ducks version. This was you could use knees, elbows, you could do kicks, punches, pins, takedowns, throws, hold, joint locking, every style, judo, jiu-jitsu, aikido, kung fu, Kempo, all the Muay Thai, all the way down the line, leg kicking, throws, everything. And it was in a boxing ring.
Amazing that Frank made it out with no injuries over here.
Well, I saw a
When we
video with
had
an
it-
eye patch. I don't know what that was about. So
That's another
I
story.
tell you,
I don't
the
know.
guy who had the tournament, his name was Tommy Lee. Now there is a Tommy
Jeff,
Lee
can I ask
in
you a
Manila.
question? That
Yeah.
tournament, would you consider that like one of the first like mixed martial arts
It
events?
was the first.
It was
It
the
was
first.
the first. Except I can't even have credit for being in the first one because the same promoter did one 3 or 4 months before that.
Okay.
Okay.
That was the first one, but that first one, he didn't really know what he was doing, didn't have as many people there.
Yeah.
But he had a good turnout, right? But he wanted to do it no weight classes.
Mm.
Well, guess who fought for the grand champion? Benny the Jet.
Benny, really?
And Benny was fighting one of his fighters, and that's why he said no weight classes, because the promoter's fighter was a heavyweight, Dana Goodson, who was about 250, 240. And so Dana's fighting Benny for the grand champion. And Benny beats him.
Oh, yeah.
Benny beats him. They underestimated him, right? And so now the next one, 3 months later, he says, okay, we're going to have weight classes next time. So that way he Dana wouldn't have to fight Benny.
Mhm.
Well, for whatever reason, Benny didn't come, but he invited me and Bill Wallace and Joe Lewis. And Bill was already committed doing a seminar or maybe a fight or something, so he didn't go. But Joe and I went. You know, we trained together before. I went out to California and hung out with him for a month before we went to Hawaii, and then we got to stay there 2 weeks. You know, I mean, I didn't care about it. I said, I get to go to Hawaii, and they paid all our expenses and paid the best money we had ever gotten. They were paying $5,000 back then for the winners. And you know what the tournaments were doing back then? Most of them were $1,000, except for the World Championships, right? And but you know, the promoter was pretty smart. He said, just for the safety, because you know they didn't know if people were going to get killed or what, right? They said if you're going to punch, you had to wear boxing gloves. If you were going to use your elbow, you had to wear an elbow pad. If you were going to use your knee, you had to put a knee pad. And if you were going to kick, you had to wear the safety kicks. So now that made it, and no eye gouging, biting, you know, those little simple things. You had to wear a cup and a mouth guard. So now, even though there was no rules, there were rules, right? But Joe and I got seeded into the quarterfinals. And so we came in and won our matches, and both of us were fighting for the championship. He was fighting against Teddy Lemos, who was a heavyweight boxer, world rank in the top 10 in heavyweights by the WBC or WBA, whichever one was the big one back then. Big, stocky, not tall, you know, Hawaiian. You know how they look like this, like they're from Samoa, and but real powerful. And Joe was beating him in the first round. Well, I thought won the first round hands down. Come out the second round, and Teddy headbutts him. Well, opened a big gash over his head. Well, I was going like, hey, well, if you're boxing, you're not supposed to headbutt. But I guess this was a no rule, so nobody said we couldn't headbutt. I didn't think about doing it myself. If I known it was legal, I would. But they didn't disqualify him. But Joe couldn't continue because the doctor wouldn't let him. Joe wanted to fight anyway, but it was directly over the top. So the blood was coming down in his eyes. So they called it, and they awarded it to Teddy. And then I fought one of the guys from Hawaii in the finals. If I can even remember his name, I actually Augie Evans was his name, and he had actually fought in the one before and lost to Dana in the semifinals last time. And he was a light heavyweight. You know, he's my weight, but he was ripped. I mean, he was the fight. You want to see it? I posted it on Facebook. And when you see the fight, you go like, oh, okay, this is real fighting. It was no moving around and pacing because it was a 3-round fight, 3 rounds, and it's elimination tournament. So you'd fight 3 rounds. If you won, you kept going. You fight 3 rounds, you keep going. And so there was no pacing or holding back. You had to go. So it was pretty wild. I knocked him down 3 or 4 times. Finally, he didn't get back up. But I posted the fight. You can see it. Yeah, and then the next thing after that, and the only reason I consider that a milestone is just because I kind of considered it the era of the first MMA style fighting. And you know, guys were throwing and guys were kicking legs and they were joint locking, but nobody knew how to do it worth a damn anyway. And
I remember that tournament because I remember it was a big deal throughout the country. I do remember that.
He ran it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 times after that, I think. Say anything like that because this was 1975. So I don't know what Dukes' dates that he's talking about, but
he was 3 years old then. So.
Yeah. So this was 75. If he says anything after that, because really up to that time in 75, nobody had done that MMA style of fighting. None of this all style. We've done full contact, even at Ocean City in 73, Bob Maxwell, because the Bondo guys, Dr. G, who was the center referee in my fights when I was fighting Howard, they had a kickboxing exhibition or actual match. They had John Dutcher, or Jack Dutcher, one of June Ree's black belts, who was an ex-Marine, about 250, about 6'5", real big, tough, burly guy. And he was fighting against Harvey Hastings. And that was one of Dr. G's black belts and good friends of Bob Maxwell. And it became a good friend of mine, too. I would go to Dr. G's summer camps and teach at his camp. And Harvey and I became real good friends. And Joe and I would go down to Florida and train with him doing kickboxing stuff, but really, really good guy. He passed away a few years ago. But, you know, that back then, after that MMA type of fight, I just liked it because it was, and I had my first match, I had the guy in the corner and I was throwing hooks and uppercuts and he was trying to cover up. And I said, what the hell am I doing? I can use my elbows. So I just started doing, instead of hooks and uppercuts, I would just throw an elbow after elbow. And then he just slowly sank down in the corner and it was it. And I said, hey, these elbow things work pretty good. Yeah. So he brought his hands up and then I kneed him down here and then he brought them back down, you know, but that was before we really knew what the hell we were doing. You know, we were nowhere near the quality of the UFC type of guys doing that type of, even trying to call that MMA. The only thing that would be MMA about it is that the rules did allow all styles. So it was a mixed martial arts. Definitely. And you could use kicks and elbows, throws and all that stuff. So it was real legitimate. And it was to the knockout. It wasn't any kind of point anything. And it was 3 rounds, so it wasn't just like a 1-round deal. So it was pretty, and Benny won the first one. So that's what gave me the credibility of even going to it. Had somebody been in it I didn't even know, I would think they're full of shit. But I said, well, if Benny was in it competing and he won, then I'm good with going.
Was Joe Coley
just before
was
you
Joe
say
Coley
anything,
one of the announcers there?
No,
Okay.
Joe wasn't there for that.
I was just going to say, Jeff, I was joking around with the other thing, but history is what we preserve here. And I enjoy the fact that you're sharing this because a lot of people don't know this stuff. And through you, they can experience it.
Well, Jeff, I have to say, You did pass your senior citizen memory test because I wouldn't remember all those names.
Let me tell you, people say, how do you remember all this shit? You did a full cut. I was 30 wins and 1 loss, 17 knockouts. I said, look, I don't care about my record, but I'm going to tell you, I held the world title for 7 years. But the thing that I'm most proud of is that I was never knocked down or out.
Really?
And very few fighters can say that. They've at least been knocked down or knocked out, but maybe came back and won it or something. But I was never knocked down or out. So I always say, the guys would say, yeah, you gotta take 2 to give 1. And I said, no. My philosophy is I take none to give 2.
Right.
So I worked a lot on defensive footwork because I didn't like getting hit. Some guys say, oh, you got to like getting hit if you do full contact. I said, no. You just means if you don't like getting hit, you got to work more on your defense.
That's right. Yeah.
If you like hitting, you work more on your offense. Well, I liked hitting, so I do that, but I didn't like getting hit, so I work on my defense. But, there was a couple other memorable times for me in the point days. My first black belt tournament was in 1969. I'm fighting in the finals, and I was just, that was Skipper Mullins, Fred Wren, and Ed Daniels, and Jim Buten, and all these guys that were, that I had seen coming up. And I'm fighting Ed Daniels in the semifinals. Well, Ed is, 6'7", 300 pounds. I'm a senior in high school. No, I just got out of high school. I was a freshman in college. I was 150 pounds. So he basically was twice my size. So I'm trying to figure, and I watched his other matches, and his leg is so long that he would kick people right on the hip. And once that would stop you coming in, then he would reach out and grab you with the other arm and then pound you to death, right? The old Texas grab them and pound them. And so I said, okay, I'm not going to let him grab my arm, right? So I tried to go in and side kick him, and he kicked into my leg, and then he tried to grab me, and I got the hell out of the way. So the next time I faked like I was going in, and he put his side kick up, and I did a jump reverse side kick and hit him square in the nose. Jim Harrison was the center referee. And when I hit him, and I tell you, to this day, I've done 5 boards with a side kick, a reverse side kick. I don't ever feel anything on my foot hitting harder than I did on his nose. I could feel the cartilage crunching, right? When I hit him, he did like a tree and fell. And the whole gym, every ring stopped because it shook the whole gym. That was 300 pounds coming down. Well, his nose was on the side of his face. It wasn't, how sometimes you get a broken nose. No, this was that detached one over here. Okay, here's Pat Burleson and Jim Harrison. They come over, no sympathy. They take 2 pencils, stick them up his nose, straighten it back up. Now his nose won't stop bleeding. So now they get balls of cotton, stuff it up, tape it here. Now, Black Belt Magazine has a picture of him with the tape and everything, and we're fighting, right? And I'm going like, oh, I should be disqualified. If anybody should be disqualified, that's disqualification, right? But Jim was the center referee, and so he didn't disqualify me. He just gave me a penalty point, right?
Okay.
And I'm going, oh, no, Mr. Harrison, really, I should be disqualified. I didn't want to get back in there with him.
Jeff, we got about 10 minutes. I want to hear about the Thrilla in Manila.
Let's get to the Ali. Okay. So the Thrilla in Manila, the good thing about that is that it was the exposure. 50 million people watching that thing live. No martial arts, even the others all up to that time put together. That's a lot of viewers live. For a martial arts event, obviously it still holds the record, but I wasn't even supposed to be fighting. It was supposed to be Joe Louis. And the reason I got in there is because of Joe Louis. they were going to use Ross Scott. And Ross Scott was 19 years old, a farm boy. He didn't, he wasn't articulate. Well, they were doing all kinds of publicity for this. They flew me to Chicago. They flew me to New York. We had all these TV, all kinds of TV stations doing all this. I was right there with Ali and Foreman, and it's crazy the theatrics that was going on. They had a big party at Elijah Muhammad's house in Chicago. And, back then there were racial tensions, still. And June Rhee and I were the only white people at the party, except for a few of the movie stars. But they treated us like royalty. I mean, they were very respectful and nice. And Kareem always gave me respect. But you know how he liked to talk trash, right? And he had that rap just like Ali, and it was great for the cameras, right? And he's going to beat you. And I got the eighth wonder of the world. I got 42 styles, and he had all this rap, right? And a great look. I mean, it was very. He was like a Muhammad Ali, just a little smaller version, right? But very neat hair. Dressed very neat. With the Muslim. Tie and suit. They weren't the ghetto. These were real class people. And, we had the press conference with Roberto Duran there because he fought on the card. And we're all there. I have a picture with Roberto and Don King and Ali and Kareem. We're all right there at one of the press conferences. So a great opportunity. We had press conference in Washington, D.C. So because Joe was supposed to fight, he was fighting Ross Scott 6 weeks before, and he thought because Ross was just a new, up and coming 19-year-old, one of Glenn Keeney's and Parker Shelton's black belts, they thought it was going to be an easy match for him, and it probably would have been for him then because Joe was in top shape then, but Joe dislocated his shoulder in the second or third round on his front hand. And, that was kind of his setup for his right hand. And after that, Ross just kept pounding him and ended up, he had sore ribs and his shoulder was dislocated. And so he was pretty worked over enough that there was no way possible that he could fight in that fight. And when they said, well, should we do Ross Scott? And he said, no, Ross Scott has no reputation. If you put him in there, there's not, nobody's going to even say who is Ross Scott. They said do Jeff Smith. He's the first world light heavyweight champion, and in boxing they do heavyweight against light heavyweight quite frequently. Usually the heavyweight wins, but they do it quite frequently over history, right? And so they put me in there, and we actually did it live here in Washington D.C. at the biggest sports arena here, which back then seated about 35,000. And that was the closed circuit show for the Thrilla in Manila. And then it shot they were showing that fight. Then they'd shoot it back for the rest of the world at the same time. My brother was in California and saw it. And everybody else in all different parts of the country and the world were seeing it broadcast like that. So it was a capacity sold out crowd here at the Capitol Center, which is the biggest sports arena back then. And I knew going into it that, I'm fighting Don's fighter, right? Don King is his promoter. He's the promoter, but he's also the manager of Kareem. And he even set up a whole office in Rockefeller Plaza for, that was their Don King's offices there. And he set up a whole office there for Kareem and his fighters. I mean, his handlers and trainers. So he was getting Ali treatment. You know what I mean? And so Joe Corley was in my corner, Asa Gordon, Jerry Rome. This was my corner. Jerry Rome was my training partner because I felt he was the closest to Kareem, And I said, if I can hang with Jerry Rome, Kareem will be easy because Jerry was just as big and Jerry was knocking everybody out back then, including Ross Scott. And so I went in there and I knew that, I was in my mind, I was thinking, if I don't knock him out, I'm going to lose. But I dominated the rounds enough, even though I didn't knock him out. He got 2 standing 8 counts. He went to the wrong corner. He stumbled to the wrong corner at the end of one round, and he never hit me or hurt me in the whole fight, but I dazed him and hit him quite a bit. And I have the whole fight. If you don't have it, I'll forward it to you, Alan. And you can look at it for yourself and see what you think. Because when I look at a fight, it's hard to be very objective when you're in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I always tell everybody, look at it yourself, make your own decision. You know, the fight is what it is. So look at it. The camera doesn't lie. So if you think he won, or I think, well, obviously, if I beat him with his judges, then I had to at least have beat him, right? Kareem was upset about it and thought he should have won or whatever. But when you see the fight, you know, you'll see what I'm talking about.
But Jeff, we got a few more minutes, and you're known as one of the greatest fighters that's coming along in many centuries. Okay, but you are a basic, as you said, you taught for Junri, you did all his schools and classes, but right now you're very successful. You're involved with William Oliver and what you do, and I give you guys credit because you built a family within your group. I have a little pet peeve that I don't. A lot of these gurus, quote unquote, martial art gurus, are more just teaching how to have a babysitter. Or again, like I said once, how many times can you put a balloon on the wall and teach somebody how to do it? And really, it's bullcrap. And then you're paying them $1,300 to learn how to put balloons on the wall. A quick story I'll say. I was at an event once, and there's some guy, and I'm not going to mention names because I really like the guy, but he had a magazine, and he had his whole article in there, and it was about this, that, and the other thing, but they never mentioned what the guy studied, what he did. All they talked about was his school. So I looked at him, I said, well, what martial arts did he? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, well, it's a martial art magazine. No, it's a business magazine. I said, no, on top, in big letters, it said martial arts, and then little letters said business. It's a magazine for martial arts first. And the guy, I love the guy. The guy changed the attitude of the magazine after that because he knew I was right. And I gave him credit for what he did. But a lot of these gurus, I mean, after you're paying a guy $1,300 a month for nothing, okay, and then you're standing in, and these guys are doing nothing with their knowledge after a certain amount of time, I got to look at it. You guys have built a family of what you do. We talked about a lot about what you do. We're not going to mention the name, but online teaching and stuff like that. But go give us a little background before we get to close up about it.
It's an interesting thing because, Steve Oliver is, was one of my black belts, but, Junri black belt and went to Georgetown University and taught for us while he was going to Georgetown University, got his bachelor's degree, went on, got his master's degree. But the guy, it was so smart at 22 years old. Now, you got to realize 22 years old, it's hard enough to run at one school by yourself, right? Without having a lot of help. He moves to Denver, opens 5 schools in 18 months at 22 with no loans, with no help from his parents, on credit cards on the first one, and got enough cash from that one to open the next one, and did 22. In the year 2000 or 2001, early 2000s, he wrote the first book on internet marketing for martial arts schools. Well, most people didn't even know what internet marketing was, maybe until a few years, 5 years ago or so. This was back in early 2000, right? So, he is so bright and a good technician, but we had been in contact the whole time. I would go out and do seminars and train and go to his tournament. He had a big NASCA tournament on the circuit and did all that. So we decided that we want to help martial arts schools. And if we're going to help our industry grow, we've got to start educating all of these fighters, because most of them only thought about fighting and nothing about what happens after you fight. And you got to have a martial arts business, or you're going to be doing a 9 to 5, because the martial artists were not making enough money like football players or basketball or baseball where they had any money left, right? So we had to do something for our industry. That was our main purpose. You know, there were so many of the top martial artists that were such good fighters or forms or martial arts instructors. They taught such good students in classes, but their schools struggled. And it had nothing to do with how good their martial arts were, because down the street, Joe Blow wasn't worth a shit, and he was making 10 times what this great martial artist was doing. So we said, we've got to make sure that we get these top martial artists and start teaching them how to run their schools. So now the people that do stay and thrive are going to be the ones that really know martial arts, and not a bunch of these guys that got their black belt and then went and opened a school somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's how we started the whole thing. And, you know, my expertise in it, I know how to run the whole business, but I was giving, you know, he was going to do all the marketing stuff and teaching them that part. And I was going to kind of do the classroom stuff, you know, because my expertise and my accomplishments, I developed a lot of national and world champions. So I had the quality in the instruction, because we didn't want to just teach the business without teaching classroom quality. So we wanted to teach them how to develop good black belts. Well, our association, our group, our martial art, it's called Martial Arts Wealth Mastery. So they're learning how to master the wealth business part of martial arts. So what we told them is that we're going to teach them how to be a black belt in martial arts business. And it takes about 4 years, no different than getting a black belt. How did you get your black belt? You didn't get it by going to a seminar. You didn't get it by reading a book and looking at a video. You went to class on a weekly basis, and you had an instructor, and you had classmates, and you learned from your classmates, and your instructor corrected you. So Steve and I got together and we said, why don't we teach the business the same way? So we started Zoom meetings 5 years ago. And even before Zoom, we were not Zoom, but internet live video, because the Z place wasn't even around. And there was other people.
Now we have the V place. We have the V place.
Well, that's why the V came and survived through the pandemic and taught people how to do it properly.
There you go. I love it.
So we were doing these online training with them. So every week we did these groups just like we did the school. We had a beginner group, we had an intermediate group, we had an advanced group, and then we had a black belt group. So that way we could train them what they need to know at this level of their business, this level, this level. Well, once we started doing this, now all of a sudden schools are double, triple, quadrupling their gross. During the pandemic last year, we had schools, multiple schools, that were doing over $100,000 a month on single operating schools, 3,000 square feet. I'm not talking about a 10 or 20,000 place, because we teach them how to do that. And when they learn how to do those things, now they want to stay with us. It's like the instructor who has a student that stays with them for a long time, because that instructor has given them something that has helped them.
Something to stay for, right.
And so if we didn't do this, if we didn't have this, we have about 100 members now, 100 schools. If we weren't around with them during the pandemic, they would have been like the rest of the industry. You know, Steve keeps a pretty good tab on the industry. And our estimate was 50% of the martial arts schools in this country went out of business last year.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
And of those remaining 50%, at least half of those were at least 50% down. The ones in our group had record year. Most of them did better in 20 than they even did in 19. And the reason is because we teach them everything about running a school from A to Z.
But
you know what most school operators...
You give them the tools to actually build. You know, it's like if you build a house with a pencil, it's not going to work. You need all the tools to make it work.
Good analogy.
Yeah.
And the problem that most school owners, you know what they come to you and ask? They say, well, just tell me how to get students, because if I get them in here, then I'm going to be successful.
That's
That's
not at all.
bullshit.
No, they're not
Because
good businessmen.
they don't know how to keep those students.
Yep.
They don't know how to control. The biggest problem in this country with schools, there's only two problems. One is getting new students, and two is keeping them.
Keeping them. Yep.
So we've got to get them to buy in to emotionally the students in your school that the purpose of coming to your school is to be a black belt,
Right.
not to be a white belt, not to do it for a year, but stay with it.
Mhm.
You need to be a black belt. Just like going to college, you got to go 4 years to get a degree.
Right. Jeff, something, like if you even see what I do and my students too, you've been to my event, you see the guys that work my event. I've got the same guys for 20, 30 years. Okay, because of the loyalty that was built in it. And I couldn't do what I do without them at that point.
Oh,
So it's one of those things. And, we try to, and I mean, you've been in business, you've done everything. We try to make our event look seamless without any problems or anything, which there are a lot that people don't see.
Your event is the perfect example for anybody. One of the things that we do with our members is we teach them, they've got to learn how to duplicate what these other schools are doing. And they do it by watching what they do, and they copy it. And by that duplication, if somebody wants to know how to run one of the events like you, if they aren't doing what you're doing, because everything you've done, how you're successful? It's not that you got 1,000 people there. It's that every year there's more people coming. And that's what we tell the karate schools. You never flatline. You're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting.
You always have that inflection point.
Down.
You have that inflection point, Jeff, where either you're going to go up or you're going to go down. And it's the choice is theirs and what they, where it goes.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Now, I always look at every year I do something, I always say I try to add something on because I don't ever want it to be boring, and keep up. And that's what you guys are basically doing, keeping the interest of all the students and instructors too. It's important also to the instructors.
And not only did we help our members during this pandemic, we were doing 2 or 3 seminars a month since March of last year, free online for people to come in and have an hour or 2 seminar on how to survive through the pandemic and what they need to do. All free, no charge. And then we sent them materials and say the 10 things you have to do. He put together a martial arts stimulus package. And if you go to martialartsstimulus.com, just like it's spelled, like it sounds, you'll get $3,000 worth of free material on how to ramp up after the pandemic, how to do all of these systems. And it'll give you such an insight into, and a lot of people will look at it and be able to apply it. Other people look at it and they go, I don't know what the hell that is. It just depends on what their business level is of knowledge, but it's available free for them that I guarantee you, if they apply just a few of those things, their gross or active count or enrollment or marketing or retention, it's whatever you need more help on, will be there to show you how to do it.
And that's all free, Jeff?
Say it again.
That's all free?
Free. No charge, no obligation. Okay. We don't say, okay, you're going to have to sign up with us before we'll give it to you. No, you go to martialartsstimulus.com. It's going to be there, print it up. There's even a contact number. Bob Dunn, who works for us, will answer your questions and show you how to answer. Some people look at it and they go, what does that mean? And they'll call him and he'll tell them. We're not trying to hide anything. We're trying to revive the industry, because what we decided back in March is if schools all go out of business, it's going to hurt us, not help us. Yep. We need friendly competition to grow the industry.
Well, Jeff, we're just about ready to close up. I want to thank you. You've been a wonderful guest, and you make it easy to have you on because you've got all your mindset and what you want to say ahead of time, so it's great. A lot of people don't do that. They get on and they fumble. So we didn't even need to bring any of our other co-hosts on.
No, we didn't need it. We didn't need anybody. We didn't need Wikipedia today at all.
I tell you, and Steve always gets on to me and says, damn, you talk too much.
No, it's
I
not a
should have
matter.
been trying to tell what it's about.
Exactly, and that's
Right.
important. Well, I just want to thank Bureau High for having us, working with us, and Lou. We're always honored to get shows like this and put some information out there for people. We have Don Warner Entertainment, Shalom Brand, Amen on channel. They'll be on hopefully next week. We have the 24-hour day martial art channel going up, so we got a lot of great things coming out. And I just say, because I know you watch this, Frank Dukes, please come on the show. We'll have a good time. We won't beat you up too much, but we're going to ask you some questions you may have.
Everybody has fans. I mean, he has his own fans. There's a whole group. It's just like people in movies who never did real martial arts, but there are a martial artist for the movies, and they look good. And nobody can ever argue with them if they say what they say. Well, I know he's good. I just saw him wipe out 30 people. And they don't realize that sometimes what you see on a movie, guess what? Those people aren't really getting shot. We don't want to spoil these movies for them, but those people aren't really dead.
Well, my friend, thank you. It's always an honor to speak to you. And if you get that stuff, you want to send that to me. And I also Mike Anderson's information. I'd love to give him a call. Say hello to him. Hey, thanks again, folks. Thanks for listening and watching the show.
I'll send you the that Alan Frazier fight, and then I'll also send you the Hawaiian thing.
Good. Excellent.
And then Mike Anderson's number.
Excellent. Jeff, thanks a lot. Lou, thanks a lot. Till next time. God bless everybody.